Welcome back to another episode of Playing the Worst, the series where we take a look at the worst game of a series. As you know, I don't believe in scores or definitive statements like worst or best in subjective matters like video games, but today's definition of worst is lowest game ranking score of any Zelda mainline title. CDI games don't count because they're spin-offs that aren't part of the timeline. Besides, that's too obvious. The lowest ranked proper Zelda game is Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link, so that will be today's topic. If you look at all the past episodes of the series, I liked all of the worst games covered so far, so we'll see if that'll be the case with this game as well. I think most everyone will be somewhat familiar with how a traditional Zelda game is structured, so the differences between Zelda 2 and almost every other game in the franchise should be quite noticeable. We're going to be looking at what I think are the negatives first, but for the second half of the video, we'll talk about positive aspects of the game. The point is to gain a sense of appreciation for something, not needlessly bash stuff. As the name suggests, Zelda 2 for the NES is the second game in the series. Most people's impression of what a Zelda game contains doesn't apply with Zelda 2. It plays a bit more like an RPG. There's an overworld with random-ish encounters, but when entering areas, the game becomes a side-scroller. Now that's totally different. It's obvious that they also wanted to add complexity to the game, and I guess you could say they succeeded in that regard. A lot of people cite difficulty as one of the main complaints of this game, but that's quite a general thing to say when a lot of details contribute to what a person may or may not find difficult. The way the game feels in terms of controls isn't really all that bad in my opinion. I think it's alright. There's a bit of a momentum effect that you feel when you're trying to get to a stop and when you're jumping around. For me, the main problem with this game is battling enemies. They often just keep running at you, and unlike with other Zelda games, you can't really avoid them if you'd rather not fight them. I tried jumping over enemies, but that doesn't really work that well. It's still really easy to take damage. I kept dying a lot, but at least you usually respawn really close to where you died. But if you get a game over, you start back in the beginning and you have to go back to the dungeon you died in. One of the biggest things I had trouble with was how the enemies popped up. When you back up slightly before continuing forward again, you can trigger enemy spawns really easily, which I think is a bit over the top. Honestly, there's actually a lot of games that do that, but still, doesn't mean I can't complain about it. And I have a tendency to just back up a little bit when an enemy shows up, so perhaps that's just something I need to override, like that instinct. A lot of the enemies are pretty fast too, which doesn't help. Something else that's frustrating is all the random encounters. In the overworld, you'll see these dark shapes suddenly chase you, and when they touch you, it starts a battle. It makes moving around the map needlessly annoying, especially when you're trying to get to a dungeon. Trying to avoid them is a fruitless endeavor. They move so fast, you're just going to run into them no matter what sort of evasive maneuver you try to perform. There are some people who say that this game isn't too difficult when you put some work into it, like learning attack patterns and things like that, but the point, for me anyway, is that I get annoyed playing it, and I don't want to put the work into it and finish the game. And I think many people probably feel the same way. When you first start out, this game really doesn't allow you to learn how to fight enemies and things like that. It feels like you're thrown in, and it's quite unforgiving. So for me, the overall experience is that it's just too unforgiving to be enjoyable. That being said, it's not like I don't like unforgiving games. In fact, if I play racing sims, I want the full experience. No rewinding or retrying, traction control ABS, or whatever. Nothing to save you, and no second chances. If you bin it, you're done. But I guess that's the thing. Your enjoyment of video games, like with anything, depends on what sort of experience you want out of it. And when it comes to Zelda games, the Zelda 2 experience is not what I want. You know those games that after a few minutes you go, yeah, I really don't want to play this? For me, Zelda 2 is one of those games. I did say earlier in the video that we're going to talk about some things I like about the game, so let's do that now. Something people don't tend to do when it comes to talking about Zelda 2 is that it's only the second game of the series. There was only The Legend of Zelda and Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link. That's it. This wasn't the legendary Zelda franchise we know today. It was a new thing back then, so it makes sense for Nintendo to try and experiment with new mechanics and gameplay formulas. So I don't fault Nintendo for giving Zelda an interesting refresh, let's say. One of the highlights for me anyway is the music. It's a really unique soundtrack that has a style not found in other Zelda games. That's mainly to do with the fact that Akito Nakatsuka composed the music instead of Koji Kondo. I think some of the songs sound like they could be transposed onto guitar quite easily and become metal songs. There's often times where there's one melody going one way and then there's a harmony going along with it. So I always think that one could be the left, the other could be the right guitar. And in that context, I think that's pretty cool. But still, ignoring the metal potential of these songs here, I still just really like music that has these harmonies going on. One of the many themes Zelda likes to play around with is the idea of opposites. So like light and dark. Zelda 2 is the first game in the series to introduce that concept with Dark Link. That simple idea led to other later implementations, not just with Dark Link, but other light and dark concepts. Link to the Past had the Dark World, Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask are counterpart games. They share more than just the same link, but also the concept of time, and Termina, the region that Majora's Mask takes place in, is portrayed as a darker alternate version of Hyrule. Wind Waker and Twilight Princess are counterparts in terms of style, and in a way the timeline as well, even though there are actually 3 timeline branches. Twilight Princess itself also has the Twilight Realm, and Link Between Worlds, well, I mean, I don't think I need to say any more, do I? And then there's also these other things that Zelda 2 introduced, like some more complex parts, like spells, that still have survived in a way today. The spells are supposed to give Link abilities, and that's been kind of transposed to items and potions, and also certain weapons or tools in later games. A lot of those abilities first appeared in Zelda 2. So in the end, I think I can sum up my experience with Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link with a bit of a music parallel. To me, Zelda 2 is like a musician or a genre of music that I'm not particularly interested in, but at the same time, I'm also a fan of music derived or influenced by it. I really appreciate the game for the things it did and tried to do. So today, when I hear Zelda 2 come up in a conversation or see it being talked about on the internet, my first thought is that of positivity, even if I don't like playing it. I've always had an overall good impression of it. I guess some people might find my stance on the game a bit strange, but that's basically what I think of it. I'd love to hear what your opinions on it are and what your experience with the game has been like. Remember to like the video if you did, subscribe for more videos, check out patreon.com/YSN if you want to support the channel, view videos before they come out on YouTube, and have your name appear on the end cards. Check out the second channel as well if you want some occasional niche Japanese game news, as well as some other random videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video.